Tatum the drive. Tatum the finish. It is Banner 18. The mission commanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell with a new live episode of You Got Boston, here to recap the first week of training camp. We got one more day, and then the Celtics will be going to Abu Dhabi. So this is the most of the media availabilities that we'll have before the season starts already happened. And so figured I'd hop on live here tonight and just get any questions you guys might have answered about training camp, and then also just share some of my takeaways and thoughts on just how the last few days have gone. It's been a lot of fun to talk to the players, to talk to Joe Mazzulla. We've talked to him a bunch of times, it feels like. We've really gotten a sense of things and just how this team is shaping to be. I think there was a lot of questions about Lonnie Walker. Got some information about that. A couple of you are wondering about Jaden Springer and if Jaden Springer was going to see minutes this year. I sat down with him yesterday for a couple of minutes and chatted with him about where he's at, how he's feeling going into the season. So lots to discuss. I think there's been some big stories coming out of camp around Jaylen and some of the things that he's talked about with his new shoe and just being super motivated, being as muscular and as in shape as ever. And then obviously there's been the chat around Tatum's shot, which I won't talk about too much because honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. He was making the shots that I saw. A lot of times I post the videos and people comment like, obviously he's an NBA player. Obviously he's going to make the open shots and shoot around. And that's true. So all I saw was that he was making shots at shoot around. And so, yeah, I think from the first couple of days, we had media day on Tuesday. We heard from most of the players on Tuesday. Then we had Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we had 4 consecutive days of talking to players and talking to coaches and everything. And it was great because it just kind of gave us an understanding of where this team was at. And I think the first thing that I would say is that there was really not much of a difference at all between this year's vibe and this year's team and last year's. And it actually came up when I was talking to Jaden Springer. I said to him, like, do you feel any more veteran this year? Do you feel like you have had a little bit more of like a leadership role, or not leadership role, even just like not being the new guy? And he was like, no, I'm still the new guy. There was a couple of Exhibit 10 signings, there's the rookies, but outside of that, like he's still, him and X are still the newest players on the team. And so I think just from that sense, sometimes you go to training camp and it seems like the environment is completely shifted. It seems like the team is completely different, or at least there's a bunch of new faces that everybody's trying to get to know. This feels like literally where we left off in June. And I think that is most likely going to be a good thing, just considering the fact that this was a team that just handily won the championship. But something that both Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla have talked about is the fact that can also be a bad thing if there's complacency. Sometimes it helps to have a new face in the locker room. It re-energizes people. And so it could go in a number of different directions here. And I think the thing that Joe Mazzulla has stressed is that, they're going to not try to continue from last year, but they're starting from scratch. So it doesn't feel that way from watching and talking to everybody. It feels like exactly the same, but I don't think they want to continue kind of coasting off of the championship and thinking about that in that sense. And so with that, feel free to continue putting in questions in the chat and I'll get to all of them today. I'm going to do a shorter one today because we have the last day of training camp tomorrow. And then I'll probably do something after that, and then they're going to be in Abu Dhabi. So I won't be there in Abu Dhabi. I won't have as much behind the scenes, but obviously preseason's on Friday. One thing I'll mention on preseason is that Jaylen Brown was talking about the fact that he has spent a lot of time in the Middle East this summer, that he has a lot of family and friends there, and that he hopes that he gets the opportunity to actually play. He was like, I don't know what the rotations are going to be. I don't know what Joe Mazzulla's plan is, but I'm going to have a lot of people there, so I want to play. And so that was just a funny thing. I have to say, Jaylen Brown, since the playoffs, like I thought that he seemed a little bit more loose in the playoffs as well, but he has been like so conversational with the media, so comfortable, laughing, making jokes, sticking around to like chat after he finishes the media scrums where he doesn't have to. So just like a very light energy about him. And I'm really curious to see how that manifests on the court, because obviously we saw him playing the best basketball of his career just a few months back, and he thinks he's gotten a lot better and that he's continued to work really hard. And I actually asked him, like, how is it possible that you traveled, we're watching on Instagram, like you're literally all over the world. How is it possible that now you're even better shape? When he was explaining how he has a whole team and a whole scheduler, and he shouted out Drew Moore, who's somebody on the staff, that everywhere he goes, he has a gym, he has exactly a plan, what he's going to do. And then it's just discipline. Like he said, he didn't really take a break all summer. So I don't think this is a guy that said, let me step away from basketball for 2 months and get back to it, or even a month. It sounds to me like he really just continued from the finals. He maybe took a little bit of time off, but by the time we talked to him in summer league, he was back at it. So really excited to see how that manifests. The obvious area of improvement in his game is free throws. Like I think that was the one thing that he was struggling with last season, and I don't necessarily think that he's going to struggle with that again necessarily. Like I could see him making a jump there, but it is so mental. So, he could have been practicing all summer, and who knows if he got better on that front. So Jaylen was something that stood out to me. Someone else that stood out to me was we talked to Neemias Queta, and he was talking a little bit about just how he's feeling really comfortable. He has this multiple year contract now. Last year when we were, at this time, he was dealing with a foot injury. He was on a 2-way. He was probably going to spend a lot of time in Maine. And so, yeah, I think that he's somebody that I would not be surprised. And I did a segment on this with Bobby Manning, but I would not be surprised if he's somebody you see a little bit more earlier on than maybe we had expected, especially with Porzingis out. And Luke had wrist surgery. Luke Cornett had wrist surgery. To me, it was out of left field. Brad Stevens said, as some of you know, and I haven't found one person that knew about it yet, so I don't think anybody knew. But yeah, certainly that is something to know, but I don't think it's the kind of injury that's going to pop up again. I think he had a fracture and he fixed it, is my understanding at least. So also running through these, and if there aren't too many questions, then I'll just share a little bit more takeaways, and we'll have more updates from tomorrow. Tomorrow we have kind of like an off the record film session with Joe Mazzulla, and those are always helpful to better understand just what he's thinking and how things are going in that sense. So it's no media, no filming or no quotes or anything, but it just helps kind of understand where he's coming from and everything. So first question, with the Knicks getting Cat, how do you think Porzingis will match up with him? So first of all, me and Bobby did a whole reaction show last night after the game. So feel free to, after the trade was announced. So feel free to, it was midnight, I was like falling asleep, but we did react to it. So if you want more on that trade, feel free to tune into that. Generally speaking, I was high on the Knicks from before. I think that they have a very well-rounded roster. I really believe in Jalen Brunson. I think that he's the type of player that you can go far with, even though I know a lot of people, the undersized guard, like there's a lot of questions about it. I just think he's a winner just from everything that I've seen, and I have him higher up than maybe most people will have him. So anyways, all that being said, last night, as most of you probably know, the Knicks traded Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo and a pick to the Wolves, and got back Karl Anthony Towns in return. And I think there was probably a number of reasons for this trade. One, they were just lacking front court depth. Like at the end of the day, Cat can play center better than Julius Randle can. Mitchell Robinson is out. He's not expected to be available at the start of the year. And then obviously Isaiah Hartenstein is gone. And I do think that Isaiah Hartenstein, move to Oklahoma City was probably the most underrated move of the summer. Like he was such a game changer for New York. As a Celtics reporter, every time I watched him play against the Celtics, it was just, the eating them up on the glass, so aggressive on rebounds. I just think that he's a headache. So getting him out of the conference is a win for Boston. Getting Karl Anthony Towns back, I know that he's a very criticized superstar. I know that a lot of people think that Karl Anthony Towns is soft and that he's had a lot of disappointing stretches to his career. But there's value that he brings. He can shoot significantly better than Julius Randle can. I think they take a little bit of a hit defensively, but he's just a little bit of an interesting defender. He actually did a good job against Jokic. For those of you that remember the Nuggets Wolves series, he was the one guarding Jokic, right? Not Rudy Gobert. So there's a lot to consider here, but I think overall, this trade makes the Knicks a little bit harder to guard. And then obviously you're thinking about Porzingis being his matchup. They have some similarities. I mean, they can both stretch the floor. They're both actually pretty injury prone. I saw today that Karl Anthony Towns has missed more games over the last few years than Porzingis has. And the other thing is that even though right now, that is the automatic matchup I would consider, Porzingis on Cat, we saw last year when they were in Minnesota that Drew Holiday guarded Karl Anthony Towns for a lot of that game. So one of the things that I've learned with covering this team is that the obvious matchup is not always the one that we see. And so I would imagine potentially that's not even the matchup that we're going to see, but it's less this one particular matchup that I'm concerned about. It's more just that I think that this is a team now that can have 5 threats on the floor and they don't have as many weak spots. Although defensively, that pick and roll duo of Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, I do think there's something to exploit there. So we'll see. I think it makes the Knicks on paper at least a little bit better, but it's always hard to say. Everybody was super excited about Damian Lillard last year, and obviously the Bucks didn't pan out. So there's always trades that can happen that on paper look really exciting, and actually most of the time they don't pan out the way that we expect. And I think actually the Celtics trade is the one that, the Drew Holiday and the Porzingis trades are actually like a rare one where you acquire stars and it pans out in the first year perfectly. So we'll see, but I'm excited, and I'm really excited that this is opening night, because at the beginning I was kind of bummed that the Knicks were opening night. Felt like there just wasn't enough juice there, and feels like this was what I needed to get it over the top to make this really exciting. So we'll see them in less than a month. October 22nd is when Karl-Anthony Towns and the rest of the Knicks will come to TD Garden. Question here about Jay Scrubb, and well titled. The username asking the question is G League fan, and that's a fitting person to ask, because Jay Scrubb, from my understanding, and this hasn't been confirmed, but I've spoken to a bunch of people about this, Jay Scrubb should be a main Celtic to begin this year. So right now the 3 two-way spots are all occupied. JD Davison, Drew Peterson, and Anton Watson, who was drafted in the second round. And so there is not an available two-way slot. Jay Scrubb had a two-way slot last year at this time, and then he tore his ACL in camp. And it's a huge bummer for somebody like him, because he was waived, and then Drew Peterson was signed later on. And so it was a huge bummer. But from what I understand, and I saw him at the Auerbach Center, not working out, but just kind of walking around. He talked to Bobby a little while ago. He said he was at 80% health, I believe. I don't think that he's cleared completely to be in game action. My understanding is he's not traveling with a team to Abu Dhabi or anything like that, but I would imagine that he is going directly to Maine. I talked to people in his camp. That's my impression of it, at least. And so we'll see if he does go to Maine, which is what it's looking to be right now. Like, that's going to be a pretty stacked Maine team. And for those of you that followed me last year, I love covering Maine. I love covering the Maine Celtics. So we'll see how exactly that pans out. But that team is going to include JD Davison, who's on his third two-way. So that's a lot of two-ways, a lot of experience. Also, that team will include Jordan Walsh, who obviously people were excited about last year and then had a really difficult summer league showing. So remains to be seen exactly what Jordan Walsh we're going to see. And then there's going to be a couple other guys from the Exhibit 10s that are currently at training camp. And then you never know. These things can come together really quickly. The head coach will be Tyler Lashbrook. Spoke to Joe Mazzulla about him yesterday. Really glowing stuff. And then also Jaden Springer. That was Jaden Springer's guy. So he said, I'm going to have to find some other guys to work with. But yeah, long answer short, Jay Scrubb is going to be in Maine. And then we'll see from there. Maybe he gets a two-way eventually. Maybe somebody else picks him up. But, if you're not in a two-way and you're balling out, and from what I remember from Jay Scrubb from last summer, he can be really elite. Maybe that's a guy that somebody else snags. So we'll see. Okay, question here from Gary. Do you think the Celtics want Queta to start shooting threes in games? Looked like he was draining them in practice. So I can just say I like to post the clips of guys shooting just because I feel like I should be giving to you guys everything that I see as much as possible. Queta is a really good shooter. Again, in the environment of watching him shoot threes with taking all the time in the world, he has a little bit of a slow release, but he's a really good shooter. It's hard to rank, but he would be in the upper half of the team, I think, as far as just three-point percentage from just me standing and watching them shoot, which it's not scientific, but just an example. He has been shooting threes since he got to Boston in practice. Pre-game, he takes a bunch. After practice, he takes a bunch. At shoot-arounds, he's always practicing threes. Now, the weird thing is that so is Luke. Luke is shooting threes pre-game. Luke is shooting threes after practice. It's a part of his routine. And obviously, as everybody that watches this team knows, Luke doesn't shoot threes in games. And so, yeah, it's a little bit confusing because Luke Kornet is a three-point shooter. He's the all-time leading three-point shooter among 7-footers in NCAA history. I believe he still holds that record. I don't think it's been broken. And so, to me, it's Luke, we have never gotten a good answer about why he does not shoot threes. I've asked Joe about it. I've asked Luke about it. I've never gotten a good answer. Luke said he likes practicing them, that it's a part of his game that he wants to keep fresh. But he's never said, when I leave, when I play for a different team, I will shoot threes, or I've been told not to shoot threes for X reason. Like, I've never gotten a straight answer for it. I'll probably ask about it again, but I have asked about it just for the record. And so I think until we see Queta shooting threes in games, like in my mind, he's in the same category as Luke, as somebody who practices threes but doesn't actually shoot them in games. And maybe it's because, long term, everybody knows right now that you don't want to be the one guy in the court that can't shoot. It just makes you a liability, right? Everybody knows most teams, like, 4 guys on the court can shoot a 1, sometimes even 5. And for the Celtics last year, there were the vast majority of playoff minutes, like, you had 5 threats on the floor, and I think is what made them really difficult to guard. And there's so many advanced analytics that have come out that have shown that other teams' rim protectors were constantly pulled away from the basket at a rate that is far superior than any other teams. And so I imagine that this Queta shooting threes thing is more of a long-term project than anything that we're seeing right now. But maybe we'll see when, he's going to get an opportunity early on. I mentioned it, we talked to him yesterday. I did a segment on it, but I do think they were going to get an opportunity, and maybe he fires them up. So until I see otherwise, I'm putting him in the Luke camp, though, just because I got to go with the fact that, Luke's not shooting them. He's still not a 3-point shooter, Queta, it's still a new thing, relatively speaking. So, okay. Question here. Do you expect Joe to play the starting 5 in Dubai? JB wants to play. Yeah, JB made it very clear he wants to play. He was like, I don't know the lineups, but I want to play. I'm going to have people there. I would, if I had to guess, and Joe said that they're balancing a bunch of different kind of strategies and plans. If I had to guess, I think that Joe starts the 5 guys that are going to be starting, especially because there's some, like, promo international stuff around it. Like, I think that there's a bunch of fans that are going to be there. It's a kind of a globalizing the game initiative. If you don't have your stars play at all, I think that's probably not the best look, is my impression of it, at least. So I've had to guess Jalen's going to start alongside the rest of the starting 5, but I don't think he's going to play like significant minutes. Like, maybe he just plays in the first half. And they're going to get other guys going. And I'm actually excited about those other guys because I feel like the stories at camp are always less about the stars, which are kind of more of a known thing, and more about the other guys. So we'll see, but that's my prediction, at least. Okay, question. After more days of training camp, what's been your favorite moment while interviewing the team? I'm assuming we're talking about this year's team and not last year's team. Probably chatting with Jaden Springer yesterday. He's somebody that I think some of you might know. I'm really excited about him. I think the 2 full games that we've watched him play were super impressive, both as a G League player. He played 1 game last year and then also 1 summer league game. But then other than that, we really haven't seen him play a lot. And so he's somebody I'm just fascinated by. I think that his defensive ceiling is so high. I see, I think if you have a gift like that, like, it's worth being excited about a player, and everything else, maybe it could come around, maybe it won't. But yeah, I did a one-on-one with him yesterday. You can check that out on CelticsBlog.com if you want to read the whole story. But he's just a really nice guy. I've interviewed him a bunch of times since he got to Boston. But the thing that I was trying to, I was talking to him about his career and where he sees his career going. And to me, it's like, what's the ceiling for Jaden Springer? Like, if I had to guess, it's being like a, really elite defender who is a role player who, comes off the bench or maybe starts and is not like the primary offensive player. From my vantage point, obviously, just watching and reporting on him and his team. But he was like, everybody wants to be the best player in the world. Like, that's where have my sights set on. And it was just kind of a funny moment because I don't think it's like him having unrealistic expectations or him having an ego or anything like that. I think it's just a reminder that, like, NBA players are different than the rest of us, and all of them think, or at least most of them, I think, can think they can be the best player in the world. Like, if you ask Pritchard, what's your ceiling? Like, I think that's what he would think as well. And so that's Jaden Springer, who has barely played in the NBA. Like, that's where he's eyeing things. And it was just an interesting conversation, and you can read more about that at CelticsBlog.com. So some Lonnie Walker questions here. Bobby did a full interview with him on Friday, so you can watch that whole interview on CLNS All Access. Question here, but when we'll find out, and then also just, you can't help but hope for the best for him. He's been super, super nice. We did a scrum with him. He's gotten this question a bunch of times in various forms around, like, are you, what went wrong, basically? I think everybody's kind of like, how did this guy end up on a training camp deal? And he has made sure to show, nothing but gratitude. He's made it very clear that he doesn't exactly know how he got here, that it wasn't what he was hoping for, but that he is going to take it and make the most out of the situation. And he's really just looking for a home. He's looking for a team that believes in him and where somewhere he can get a multiple year situation. And right now, it's not the Celtics. Like, there hasn't been that guarantee. He has said a couple times, this is what I'm hoping to happen. God willing, this is what will happen. But he's also made sure to constantly disclaim that he doesn't know exactly if this is going to materialize into a 15th roster spot, and that he's open to spending time in Maine, and that he's talked about that with Brad. So we'll find out in the next few weeks. I'm not sure an exact date. Obviously, the roster has to be finalized in the next few weeks before the season begins, but I will find that exact date actually, so I can share that with you all. But yeah, it's right now, like, people are wondering how's Lonnie looked. Like, he has been literally smiling at all times. Like, that's been something that stood out to me. Some people have like a very straight face when they're working out. He is grinning while he's shooting. Shot looks very smooth. Mostly just seen him playing, shooting threes. We haven't seen much more of anything else. One thing I did not realize is how good of a friend he is, how good of friends he is with Derek White. Like, he is super, super close with Derek White. That's something that I knew they played together in San Antonio, but you never know to what extent two people might be, really good friends or just teammates for a couple of years and they go their separate ways. And I also didn't realize that he was good friends with Drew Holiday and that he spent time working out with him in Los Angeles at his home and everything. And so Brad Stevens mentioned that, and then Bobby followed up with Lonnie on that yesterday. So if you want more Lonnie Walker, feel free to check that out on YouTube. Celtics All Access, CLNS Celtics All Access. I have to say, like, I'm supposed to be unbiased, but like, I am rooting for him. I think that he's just a fun player and he seems like a really nice guy. And it's more fun to have a 15 spot filled than to have it, empty for financial reasons from a reporting standpoint. And I'm sure for the fans too, everybody would rather have Lonnie Walker on the roster than just, have ownership save some money. But, you got to think about big picture things. And if he's not going to play, then I get it. But if he is going to play sometimes, then I think it's probably worth it. So, we'll take a quick moment from our friends over at PrizePicks. Feel free to continue putting in questions in the comment bar meanwhile. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still alive. So right now, if you're watching games, if you're watching basketball, different sports, the injury insurance thing, that can be a lot of fun. That has already benefited me in the past as well. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Great. So I'm just looking through these comments here. The Abu Dhabi comment, everybody is available as of right now. There's been no official injury report. So just as far as I understand, everybody's available. Xavier Tillman said he's available. Luke said he is. But again, we haven't seen anything formal there. Obviously, Porzingis not available, needless to say. And I haven't seen Porzingis shooting or working out or anything. You guys will definitely see clips when Porzingis is on the court. That's like media bait. The second that he steps out, everybody pulls their phone out. Everybody knows that everybody wants to see those clips. So those will be available. I see a question here about the Connecticut Sun. I'm going to save that for the end so I can talk WNBA at the end and I'm not bouncing around, but I will do that because there's a lot to talk about there. I'm going to scroll through the rest of these, though, in the meantime. What do you think, what stood out to you during training camp so far? I think the main thing that has stood out to me is how similar everything is, like how it just feels like nothing has changed at all. There isn't like a, now that we won the championship, this is how we feel. Or now that we won the championship, vibes are completely different. Like that is probably the main thing that I've noticed, honestly. So, again, this is only my second year covering the team. So I started last year in the middle of the year. This is my first training camp. So it's all kind of new still, but I expected there to be like an energy of like, okay, we won the championship. Now we're talking about repeating or defending the title. And I think it comes from Joe and it's probably everybody's bought into it. But there is not any of that at all. I think the general feeling is like, we are starting over. It's really hard to repeat. We're really grateful to be in the position to even be in that conversation. But it's very business-like. Everybody's talking about how hard training camp has been. Drew Holiday said, last year I missed the first day of training camp, but I wish that I had missed it this year too, because of how hard it is. Like, obviously joking, but you know, Jaylen Brown said, Missoula's a psycho in a good way. They've been doing drills where you don't score, drills where you don't pass, drills where you don't dribble. So it sounds like they're doing all sorts of weird things. But outside of that, like the habits of everybody are the same. Jaylen is at his basket working with a few coaches. Tatum's in his basket working with his few coaches. Derek's doing his shooting competitions and that he always does like a trick shot that he does, and they were all working on that. No Charles Lee. He's the guy that's usually pretty involved. Obviously, he's the head coach of Charlotte right now, and I'll be in Charlotte in a couple of weeks covering those two Celtics games in the end of October. So we'll see. We'll see how kind of those kinds of losses impact the team. But it is pretty funny. It feels like there was just such little change that everybody's in their same spot. Nothing's really shifted, and there's some guys that we don't actually ever see at training camp. Like we never see Drew Holiday. I think he's a guy that maybe works out before, but he doesn't hang around after. So I don't even know what his basket is, honestly. But everybody else, same routine as usual. Obviously, no Porzingis. That's the one guy that usually would shoot around that we just haven't seen. Question here: do you think the Towns trade makes ownership say, "Yeah, sign Lonnie"? Maybe a little. I mean, it feels like the Lonnie question is more about whether they're willing to pay the luxury taxes that is associated with signing that additional roster spot, and how comfortable they feel with not having another big man backing up, Porzingis in his absence. So to me, like, I don't know. I don't think that the Towns trade like shook the landscape that much. And to be honest with you, like Lonnie Walker, like I don't think they're expecting him to be a playoff potential, a playoff rotation player. If they were, they'd sign him. That's kind of what it comes down to. I think what it comes down to is, defensively how he looks. Like if he looks really good defensively in training camp, like maybe they're thinking, okay, this is actually a guy that will change the complexion of this team. Again, this is speculative because we haven't had any of this confirmed, but I would imagine what the conversation behind the scenes is right now is like how worth it is to pay a bunch of money for this player. Like, is this guy really going to impact us a lot or not? And if he's going to impact this team and actually play real minutes, like maybe it's worth going into the luxury tax and paying, millions of additional dollars. And I don't have the exact amount of what it would be, but Karl-Anthony Towns makes the Knicks a little bit better. But I don't know that it changes things all that much. I've heard a little bit about Peyton Pritchard's getting picked on for being smaller, but Pritchard's a good defender. So, it all kind of balances out, but we'll see. I have not heard anything about building a new arena. Obviously, it's something that I hear radio people talking about, but it's not something that's come up around the team at all. I haven't heard anything about the ownership thing. I think Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday both made clear, they were both asked about the ownership thing, that it's kind of none of their business and they're not that concerned about it. I'm sure behind the scenes internally, people are a little bit worried about it. I'm sure there's this feeling of I don't want to, I don't know. They like their current ownership. They like Steve Pagliuca. They like Wick. They get along well with those guys. Steve has really backed up a lot of Jaylen Brown's off-court social justice initiatives. They've done Raise the Age together, which was a criminal justice reform bill. So there's no reason that they would want to, that they would want to make things, get a new group or anything like that. But at the same time, I totally understand them not wanting to talk about it or speculate about it too much. Okay, I just saw someone said mic is still upside down. Okay, I'm going to try to fix it. I don't know. Is this better? I might be wrong. I might have to just fix it for next time. Okay, I'm going to scroll through the rest of these quick. How has Jordan Walsh looked? We haven't heard from him yet as a scrum. And then also, I've only seen him practice jump shots. So he was making his free throws, but not a whole lot more since Summer League. Obviously, I saw him a lot at Summer League. I talked to him a lot at Summer League. I feel bad. I feel all the Summer League guys are sick of talking to me because I was the only reporter that was there in the last few days of Summer League. So it was just me, 5 minutes straight of questions for everybody that was available. So, but everything I see about Jordan Walsh, he seems like a really fun guy to be around. He seems really happy. He seems like a hard worker. And I think that he had a really tough couple of weeks in Vegas. And I don't know that it's reflective of him or anybody else, anything beyond just the fact that he had a bad couple shooting weeks. And as you guys, those of you that have heard me talk before, I'm not a huge person about shooting struggles when they're in a limited sample size. I just think it's part of part of basketball, part of life, and there's no reason to have like big ramifications beyond just the fact that someone is not the most consistent shooter, where Jordan Walls obviously isn't. But I think he'll be in Maine to begin the year. I think I'll probably spend most of the year in Maine, which, yeah, I guess it's kind of weird. Like, these draft picks keep going to Maine, and we haven't seen anybody that Brad's drafted actually end up in Boston yet. So we'll see if Jordan Walsh can crack the rotation at some point. I thought with O'Shea gone, there was like a slim opportunity, but then seeing him in Vegas, like it just looks like he's still a little bit away from actually being able to impact the court. And talking to Jaden Springer, who just turned 22 this week, he's entering his 4th season, I believe. And it makes you realize just like how young some of these guys, Baylor Shireman is 24, right? So it's all relative here when we're talking about age and everything like that. Okay, so the path to Lonnie being on the team is that if he is not, signed before training camp, he goes to Maine, and then anybody can grab him. And so if you're a Lonnie Walker fan, first and foremost, you just hope that he goes to Maine, he balls out. And if he really balls out, there's going to be this feeling right away. Like I'm confident that somebody will pick him up. Like he's a scorer. He has called himself a bucket a number of times, like instant points. And there's always guys that don't pan out. There's roster spots, guys getting waived. Like there's always guys that get picked up for Maine. And he's not a traditional Maine guy. Like he's a veteran. He's a guy coming off a pretty solid couple years. So the risk to have him just be in Maine until February is that somebody else can snag him. And I would guess that somebody would, although clearly we all have the wrong impression here of what Lonnie Walker's pathway is going to look like. So that's the challenge. If you could sign him to a two-way, then you have his rights, but you can't do that here in this case. And so that's why it's like, I don't think the Celtics would get him if he went to Maine. I think that somebody else would eventually grab him. Unless he goes to Maine, he doesn't do that well, but you never know. I think that it's hard to adjust from being a role player in the NBA to now you're trying to show off in Maine and show that you're really good. So although Isaiah Thomas has made a career out of showing us how to dominate, in Maine. So we'll see. I'll share anything more that I learned. It's kind of funny how much we've been talking about Lonnie Walker because he's like, on an Exhibit 10, but I also totally get it because Lonnie Walker is somebody that people are excited about, and for good reason, because he was a big name. He was one of the bigger names going into free agency that was undetermined late in the summer. And next thing you know, Celtics grab him, and now it's looking like maybe he won't even stay here. So I'll keep sharing anything that we report on him. But yeah. So yeah, I'm seeing a comment here that it would make sense that he'd be close with White and Holiday. Yeah, I think the defensive potential is there, but it's also been one of the question marks around him. On the Lonnie Walker thing, I think we've talked a little bit about this, but so much of what I've realized is like this stuff is about how like you play your cards. And he hasn't specified at all about what went wrong. I guarantee you that there was some miscalculations with his agents or stuff like that about like what went wrong. But I don't know. I have a feeling that this market is just out, like cutting out a lot of people. Like I'm seeing reports that O'Shea Brissett might be going overseas, that he's, being sought after by Serbian teams. And, I was thinking, Shea Brissett was opting out to get a 3-year deal somewhere, and obviously he didn't get that. And so I think a lot of guys went into free agency, and maybe they made the wrong move early on. Like maybe guys passed down veteran minimums, and then somebody else got those veteran minimums. It's all a big gamble. And I think Lonnie Walker, O'Shea Brissett, Markelle Fultz, who's still unsigned. Like there's a lot of guys out there that are on the losing end of this gamble right now. And there's guys like Svi that got a contract. I would not have guessed that Svi would have a deal and that Lonnie Walker wouldn't, but that's kind of the name of the game. It's, who you talk to and, very specific things about you and, reputational things. And so it's more complicated, I guess, than it might look on paper just looking at box scores. Early impressions of Baylor, hearing really good things. I haven't seen him play at all since Vegas. I thought that he looked solid in Vegas. He mentioned that he's gained 10 to 15 pounds since Summer League, which to me seems like a lot. Like we're talking muscle here. I saw some people saying it's not possible. He said it. I think he'd say it only if it was true, but I can't really gauge. Like it didn't look to me, so he didn't look substantially different to me, but I don't know him that well. I met him in Vegas and spoke to him a few times then and just once here. But he seems like a guy that's just happy to be here. There's something very just graduated from college about him. And I say this as somebody who graduated from college a few years ago too, but he was talking about like, oh, I can get the meal plan. I can capitalize on like the kitchen. I'm trying to have multiple meals here a day. Like he just has a really like, I'm so happy to be here energy. I'd imagine that he goes to Maine. I'll cover those games when I'm up there. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see if, he's a guy that sneaks into the rotation. Like my initial instinct is to say he won't be, but you just never know. And I'm just going to circle through these really quick, and then we'll wrap things up. Tillman and Luke, I haven't seen them shooting at all. So we've only heard from them, but we haven't seen anything of them. I think that's one of the things that's tough with covering the team is that, they open up practice, but then a lot of guys are already out at that point. So, there's a lot of guys that we watch a lot, like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Those guys are always in the mix. And then there's guys like, I don't think that I've ever seen Peyton Pritchard at practice. Like, he seems to get out of there quick, and maybe he was there before or whatever. So no Luke or Tillman limitations, but also no Luke or Tillman sightings. And from what I've heard, they're both good to go. And Tillman said he's been feeling a lot better since having this surgery on July 30th. So that's only 2 months ago. If he's already doing better, it doesn't sound like it was a very substantial thing. It was a knee scope. So yeah. Any info on the details for 741? 741 is Jaylen Brown's new shoe company. He talked about it quite a bit. He said that he knows it might not be successful. He did it out of boredom and wanting to just see if there's another way to do things. Very Jaylen Brown-esque move. He wants to be able to, players that don't want to go the mainstream route, like Nike or whatever, like he wants to be able to provide them with like a blueprint of like, okay, I started my own company, you can do it too. He did say a bunch of times, like, no shade if you do want to do it too. If you do want to do the mainstream way, like, I think he wanted to make sure that it didn't sound like he was, throwing a shot at Jason Tatum at all. So he said it like 5 times, like, totally respected if that's the path you do want to go. But like, I wanted to try something different. And like, I know that some people want to do that. But I haven't seen any ad campaigns or anything like that. I've seen the shoes. Not my personal favorites, but I'm not like much of a fashion shoe person anyways. They look very different. Maybe it's just like something I'm not used to seeing, but he's wearing them. They're $200, which I've heard people talking about that it's a little bit more, but I think the price point for kids is going to be significantly lower, though I don't have that confirmed. And then do we know if Jaylen's going to sign players, college players to his shoe brand? He didn't specify who. He said that there's NBA players and college players that he's sending the shoes to, but he did not specify who those might be. And I don't know if he's going to sign people. I don't think this is going to become like a massive operation. I think that it was like a project for this past summer. I would be surprised if all of a sudden like Jaylen Brown's like signing a bunch of people, but he surprised us plenty of times. So you just never know with him. Comment here on ownership. Yeah, I think everybody hopes that Steve Pagliuca is able to take the lead owner role, keep things consistent, but also financially, I don't know if he has like the money to do that. I know that there's been some really, really rich names in the mix. It's hard to even stack up these rich people against one another, but from my understanding, I think he'd probably have a little bit of an uphill battle to get the bid, but I know that he's interested. But again, haven't heard much confirmed at all about ownership or any of that stuff. Like, hasn't been a big story at training camp, just because like none of the people that are there can like offer that much up, because they're all waiting to hear as well, I think. Okay, let me see. Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Last question I guess I'll do is, what other early season games are you looking forward to beyond New York? I think, honestly, like, I'm excited to just see the big matchups. I'm excited to see them play against the Warriors. Like, I hate to feed into that, the Olympic stuff, but I think that, the Jaylen Brown, the Jason Tatum, Steve Kerr stuff, like, it's just a fun storyline. I don't think that it's actually that deep, but I think the city will be very rowdy. That's in November. And then just seeing how they stack up against, 76ers, the Bucks, all the Eastern Conference rivals. The Eastern Conference just matters more because you're going to play more of those teams. So just seeing how those stack up will be a lot of fun. So with that, I will wrap up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Feel free to send me additional questions via Twitter if you'd like. Feel free to. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Saturday night. I'll have more from practice tomorrow, updates, analysis, all that. Check out my Jaden Springer story on Celtics blog. And in the meantime, if you want to make sure you get the You Got Boston episodes, you can subscribe on my YouTube channel, You Got Boston. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your night.